We'll now take your questions, but remember my appeal on climate change first. Yes, madam. We have microphones around here. This microphone.
Thank you. Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. I'd like to ask you, you were talking a lot about, or mentioning at least, about coming together to think up solutions. Now, you are all smart people, so I assume that you already have a basis for discussion, that is some solutions that you have in mind. Could you perhaps give us some ideas as to what these might be? And do you see yourself as a sort of lobbying group for governments to try to promote these ideas that you have, these solutions on climate change with governments?
I think it would be presumptuous to say that we have solutions and we are coming forward with solutions. We have identified a problem, we have some ideas, and we are bringing together around the table a group of men and women with considerable expertise for all to put our heads together and think through how we tackle the issue of humanitarian impact on the individual and the communities, particularly the most vulnerable. How do we increase their resilience? How do we help them develop capacity to be able to adapt? How do we pay for adaptation? And a whole series of questions of that nature. I think by the time we've discussed it at the June session, we will have better ideas and probably something approaching what you call a solution. Even if it's not a solution, it could be ideas that could be furthered on. It could be a challenge to others to do more, to join the fight. But at this stage, we cannot say that we are coming with solutions, and it will be presumptuous.
What about the lobbying part? What do you intend to do afterwards?
I think what we would want to do would be to identify the key issues to be addressed, bring around the table people who can not only share their expertise, but perhaps come together and form partnerships for action and create. We don't want to be a talking shop. We hope that out of our discussions and our meetings will come out concrete partnerships for action. We would hope to be able to encourage others. For example, WMO has lots of information. They know when drought is going to hit, sometimes years or months ahead. How do you get that information out to the farmers and people on the ground who need that information? Maybe we can help linking them up with people with communication capacity to do that. So there are quite a lot of things. We are not, so we will not be a pure lobby group. Obviously, we will push governments. Obviously, we would want civil society to become more energized on this issue or work with us on the issues we identify. So this would be our role. Walter, you want to add something?
No.
Yes.
Gordon Martin, Vatican Radio. Sir, do you think that the biofuel industry should be allowed to develop unchecked, as it shows every sign of wanting to do? Thank you.
That is a very good question. I think let me put it this way. The jury is still out. The viability, the long-term viability of biofuel industry is not determined yet, particularly when one decides to use grains like maize and others, or soybean and others for biofuel, or even palm oil for that matter, because you need to cut the forest to clear the ground to be able to plant them. And of course, it has such an impact on food production and food prices, at least for the moment, before the forces of supply and demand come in to adjust. But we are going through a very serious crisis, and we're going to be seeing lots of food strikes and demonstrations around the world. It's not entirely the fault of, there are other factors. There's great demand for grain, great demand for meat. People who were not eating protein before have the means to buy it. Most people do not realize that to produce 100 calories worth of meat, you need to feed the cow 700 calories. And when you are using the same grain that you used to feed, it goes through the chain. It affects chicken prices because that's feed meat and down the line. And it pushes the poor. Some of us in this room may not feel it if the prices go up 50% or that, but those who will spend 60, 70, or 80% of their salaries on food, that is a very serious problem. And I think governments and people are looking at the economics of biofuel, and for the moment, I think it has a negative impact on food supplies. But down the line, of course, supply and demand will come. Farmers will respond and perhaps produce more, but you're still talking a couple of years. In the meantime, we need to feed millions who cannot afford to feed themselves. I mean, I just came from Kenya. The farmers who were doing very well in food production in Kenya had moved up considerably the past 3 years. Yes, ma'am.
Yolanda Roja, El Universo, Ecuador. Mr. Anand, you mentioned that many countries, I mean, some countries are making progress in this fight to climate change. Could you please name some of these countries? That's one question. The second one is, it's a sort of follow-up of my colleague here, Lisa. How are you going to deal with some governments? I'm talking especially Africa and Latin America, because they don't have a real culture of environment or whatever. And how are you going to deal with them with this, the sounds that the polluters may pay? How are you going to do it?
No, I think there's a great deal of awareness growing on the environmental issue, and many more governments, the general public and civil society are becoming aware, and they are going to put pressure on their governments to be responsive, whether it's in the north or the south. In some southern countries, NGOs are playing a very active role. In the United States, for example, the states, the individual states, are taking initiatives to combat the environmental damage, and in fact, they are leading instead of Washington. And eventually, Washington will catch up, and we are seeing this in other countries. And so we should not give up or be complacent about it. We should give them the information and the material to be able to maintain that fight. Yes.
Yes, Jan Habermann. I write for Tagesspiegel Berlin and other papers in Germany and Switzerland. Mr. Anand, you said that you want to do business with the business community. Which companies have you approached already, and what are the results?